ADD, ADHD increased hugely, even just from 2008. Depression, anxiety, also huge increases over the last 10, 15 years. And if we come to autism and the autistic spectrum, this is the one that everybody should sit down and realize what this number means. From 1979, one of the first studies in the world, so we've gone from 1 in 500 children to 1 in 150 in 2000, and now we're at 1 in 36 in America.
Everybody says this, and I'm going to keep pounding on it. Sugar, and it's in everything. The sugar and the dyes, and I think those are two of the biggest culprits, but sugar is in everything, and parents don't really even know what to look for because there's so many names for sugar, and so that becomes an issue. It sets them up for lots of brain issues along the way, but what happens is, you're getting these spikes in blood sugar and then these drops, and childhood obesity is through the roof. So when women get pregnant, there's this very excited feeling. They want to do all the right things. This is what I have seen. Because I think it gets harder once you have a baby and they get fussy and you're tired and you're busy, and especially if you're working, and all of a sudden it's like, just make sure they're getting food. Because, and then they're going to school and they've got awful school lunches, or people are serving cupcakes and they're serving all of this stuff, and you lose that, you feel like you don't have control. It's not true. I think that's the first thing, is you have to take your control back and stop having the sense that you don't have control. We typically will, if we have a kid that has significant behavioral issues or mood issues, which is mostly what we see, my husband will put them on an elimination diet usually. If they're really severe, they've got something very, very severely clinical, yeah, he's going to use medication. But typically that's not where we start. That's not the first thing we do. That's the last thing he wants to do, is put kids on medication. But we start with things like nutrition, supplements. We don't want to label them and have that stick with them for the rest of their life. That's just not what you want. And it changes brain chemistry when you start some of that.
And today we're very, very privileged and a great pleasure to have Tana Amen with us. Tana's a BSN, RN, registered nurse, neuroscience nutrition expert, and the best-selling author of the Omni Diet, The Brain Warrior's Way, and Relentless Courage of a Scared Child. Pleasure to have you here, Tana.
Thank you so much.
Really nice to have you.
As the vice president of Amen Clinics, she is a leading voice in brain health and integrative medicine. Tana is passionate about empowering families to optimize their children's brain development through smart nutrition, lifestyle choices. Her work focuses on using food as medicine to boost cognitive function, reduce inflammation, and enhance emotional resilience. She has appeared on The Doctors, Today, Good Morning America, sharing her expertise in transforming health through diet and holistic wellness. As co-host of the Brain Warrior's Way podcast, Tana provides practical tips for building resilient minds and strong bodies from birth through childhood, which is what we're all about here. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome to the show. Tana Banana Montana. That's how we're told to talk to you. I have a sister is Tanya.
Yeah,
so
see, most people...
It would probably come off and
Exactly.
slipped as Tana. But
right.
And by the way, I answer to Bruce, just so everyone here knows. Everyone forgets the little tip of the U, or they just read it as Bruce. But we're excited to hear all about the Omni Diet. As well, you're going to show us how to make maybe some smarter brain-boosting choices for our kids starting day one, and of course, maybe even get into uncovering some of the dangers lurking in common kids' foods as they pertain to brain and overall function. But before we get there, we like to always start the program with what's trending. And Dr. Murray always has some very interesting things to say. So without further ado, Dr. Murray, let's hear all about these worldwide stats and the modern day phenomenon of the origin of these childhood disorders.
Absolutely. So really, to understand the importance of what we're talking about today and what we're going to be looking at is to understand what's happened to children around the world and America in the last 30 to 40 years. It really is, this is the pandemic.
Yeah.
So you look at this, especially with the brain, autism, ADD, ADHD, 300 to 500% increase in the last 30 to 40 years. Then you have all the other physical, obesity, the connected things. But when we look at the overall picture, never before in our lifetime and in our history have we seen such a huge increase in these very, very important, impactful disorders. And when we understand that, for children, we're building the foundation. This is where it all starts. If we don't do it correctly in those first 7 years, then we see the ill effects later in life. So all the more important.
Ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, as they say, right?
And if we just focus in on, the chief sort of brain disorders, ADD, ADHD, autism, developmental disabilities, we see now that it's really 1 in 5 children in America is suffering from one of these disorders. ADD, ADHD increased hugely, even just from 2008. Depression, obviously the last 3 or 4 years, what happened in the world affected this too. Anxiety, also huge increases over the last 10, 15 years. And if we come to autism and the autistic spectrum, this is the one that everybody should sit down and realize what this number means. Because we've gone from 1979, one of the first studies in the world to actually look at this as a global phenomenon. So we've gone from 1 in 500 children to 1 in 150 in 2000, and now we're at 1 in 36 in America.
Wow.
That's the progression. If we don't understand, if we don't do something to address this, the number just keeps increasing.
It's crazy.
Yeah. And why the first 7 years? I mean, Aristotle, one of the greatest philosophers of all time, give me a child until he is 7 and I will show you the man.
I love that.
Yeah. It truly is. This is the foundation. And when we're looking at the brain so much with Tana today, I wanted to bring this slide so everybody realize, by the age of 7, the child's brain is 95% the size of the adult brain. So all of that growth, all of that foundation, all of that platform is created in the first 7 years, which is why it's so important to hear what our very special guest has to say today.
Absolutely. So great to have you here. Let's deal with the elephant in the room, why don't we? You stand alone as a powerhouse in what you've developed as your message to the world, both in brain health as well as overall health. We'll talk about the Omni Diet. But wife to the wonderful Dr. Daniel Amen.
I am.
Of the Amen Clinics. And you are, as I understand it, vice president of the Amen Clinics.
I am.
Wow, that's a lot to take on. But wonderful work that you guys are doing separately and together. So kudos to all of that. And I say elephant in the room because Dr. Dan Amen is the man. And, but again, you stand out way, way outside of his shadow. One of the things I wanted to say that really caught my attention, we shared it together actually off camera, that you said that struck a nerve with us, and that is, as a registered nurse, you said, I think doctors tell you what to do, and nurses show you how to do it and hold your hand in the process.
Yeah, my husband and I came up with that because when I met him and started working together with him to come up with some of the nutrition programs for our patients and people he was working with, he sort of came up with that because he's like, I'm really good at telling them what to do, but I really need you to help them, like, really hold their hand and show them. And I'm like, well, that's kind of what nurses do. We advocate for patients, right? We help them with the program. We help them get it done.
I love it.
So,
and then this larger overarching helping turn, people's pain into purpose, but not just physical pain, mental, emotional pain. You share with us. I mean, we were also just starting to talk about it a few minutes off camera. What was your driving inspiration, your impetus to sort of branch off into this perhaps more holistic approach to health?
I was a trauma nurse. It was very Western medicine. I was like worked in a level A trauma unit. Yep. So this is very different. But if you like, just the title of my last book, which was a memoir, was The Relentless Courage of a Scared Child. Right. So you guys know a lot about ACE scores, or adverse childhood experiences. Mine is an 8. So I have a score of 8 on a scale of 0 to 10. My nieces, who we adopted out of foster care, are a 9. And basically that's, just for the purposes of the listeners, that is a scale where they're rating the bad things that happen to you within your home, not even outside of your home, just within your home during your childhood years. And based on that rating, when I got interested in it was when I learned, this actually determines the outcome of your long-term health. I didn't know that. Who knew that? So basically, if you have a score, and correct me if I'm wrong on any of these stats, but if you have a score of 4 or more, then you are more likely to have 7 of the 10 chronic diseases that basically people suffer from in America. And if you have a score of 6 or more, you die on average 20 years
Right.
earlier.
The
So
longevity factor.
yeah,
I'm familiar with.
and that just explained my whole life because I was a really sick kid. I was a frequent flyer in the hospital. I was always on antibiotics, ding, 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 so my gut. But I had upper and lower GIs when I was 4 years old. And then I've had multiple surgeries. I had cancer when I was 23. And so it never made sense to me until I put it in that context. The chronic stress, the chronic fear, the just the trauma, the past trauma that you deal with as a kid matters. It matters a lot. And I didn't want to repeat that cycle. Not only did I want to figure it out because I was like, I'm not good with someone telling me I'm going to die 20 years early just because I had no control over my childhood. So I want to know what I can do to help mitigate that. And then I also want to know, how do I not repeat this pattern? I mean, we took in my nieces for a reason, and I have a daughter, and I want to make sure that I am doing something very different.
That's incredible.
Fantastic.
Self-empowerment. And so much of what we talk about on the show really does start not just in the physical brain, but in the mood, behavior, executive function parameters, right? For which I know you and your hubby are so well versed. And to our listeners, I think it's important for them to acknowledge that it does start foundationally with a lot of the nutrition and a lot of the ingredients we often talk about and focus on in the show. Yeah. But so much of it does have to do with environment as well and the exposure to trauma and stressors. What are some of the resources, besides your incredible book, that folks, young parents with young children should be aware of? Resources to deal with trauma and deal with stress and deal with, some of these inadvertent experiences that, God forbid happens, but it happens all the time.
Absolutely.
Right?
So I think one of the number one things that really helped me, this is funny, my husband actually gave me 10 sessions of EMDR, or eye movement eye movement desensitization reprocessing is a form of therapy for trauma. And I almost canceled my first date with him when I found out he was a psychiatrist because I was like, I don't want you to shrink me. Like, I'm not doing this. And then, of course, he gives me this gift as one of my first gifts from him. And I'm like, okay, you're shrinking me now. But it was the best thing I ever did, I have to tell you. So I think EMDR, for people who have been through trauma, it's a very specific type of therapy that really helps the brain reprocess. It doesn't get rid of it. It helps you reprocess it so it doesn't have the same trigger. You don't feel it the same way in your body. It doesn't sit the same way. And you feel more empowered. You feel more in control of it. And that was just critical for me. And then I think there are so many other resources that people don't realize. They're like, well, I don't have money to go to some of these doctors. There are so many, we live in an era of, just free resources. So even like our website or your podcast or our podcast, there's so many free resources out there that you can actually tap into. But I do think that if you've got past trauma, actually learning how to process that trauma is really critical.
It is. I mean, who doesn't also, right? And kids are resilient, but there comes a time when, certain traumatic events may be insurmountable or they need, clinical intervention. I'm sure Cleveland Clinic says EMDR is known to help because it manages, for its role anyway, in treating post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's used in expanding to include many different treatments and other conditions. So that's definitely something for people to look into.
Absolutely.
And as I alluded to earlier, who doesn't have trauma? But let's focus on the on I guess what we do best here on the show, which is dietary nutrition and ingredient backbone. You wrote a book called The Omni Diet.
I did.
Tell us all about that because that applies to all ages and stages.
So I've written about 10 cookbooks, but the Omni Diet was, I would say, my hallmark or my trademark book because that one really included the why behind everything you should do. And I really submerged myself. That was actually an organic outcome of my own journey and getting well. Yeah. And so then I just decided to put it all down for our patients and it grew into this career. But really it's about what we're eating and how we're processing that food is either medicine or it is poison. And it's really pretty that simple. In this day and age, there's a lot of poison out there. And we don't even realize it because it's a slow poison. It's still a poison. And I think when I began to realize that, I really wanted people to understand that you don't have to settle for that. You really can. There are so many foods out there that are healing, that are anti-inflammatory. But when you're eating foods that are inflammatory like that, especially as a child, it sets you up for a lifetime of chronic illness like I had.
That's the platform.
Right.
Childhood, yeah. So again, it just sort of brings us back to, in a way, it's common sense that we've forgotten. Clean water, clean food, clean air is what we require as human beings to grow and develop properly. And, I think being put in the path of that so much is just that, industry change, food industry changed over these last 20, 30 years. And the numbers that we looked at the beginning are the reflection of those changes in people's diet and lifestyle. So to bring it back to the basics, clean food, clean water, clean air.
It's so true. Yeah. And I hear so many people get caught up in the food fight. You're not doing it right if you don't do this. You're doing it wrong. You have to. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's why so many people give up on it. And I think if you just go back to those basics of why don't we just focus on whole food, clean water, let's not get too crazy about all the little details. We just remove the sugar, minimize it as much as possible, get rid of the processed foods, the plastics, all of these things. We just start with that. We don't have to argue about all the details unless you've got specific issues with your kid, and then we go from there.
Right. Well, that level of simplicity echoes and resonates with you, I'm sure, at a deep level, because what I hear you saying all the time is get very simple when it comes to brain care. In fact, you guys start, when I say guys, again, I'm referring to you and Dr. Daniel Amen, but starting with care. Like, you first have to care. Unpack that a little bit for us, because I know parents care. Yeah. And I've heard you say this before as well. They care almost overly in ratio when they're in pregnancy. They're eating for their unborn child. They're sleeping for their unborn child. They're doing maybe even for brain health and growth. But as soon as that unborn child is born onto the world, it's kind of like, well, we just have to make sure they get enough calories. And there's a sort of...
that was actually part of what I put in my notes when I was going to be on this pod. And that and the stats for the ADD. And so it's really interesting that you guys brought that up. That's what I've noticed. So when women get pregnant, there's this very excited feeling. They want to do all the right things. This is what I've seen. And they just, I even had this a little bit because I think it gets harder once you have a baby and they get fussy and you're tired and you're busy, and especially if you're working, and all of a sudden it's like, just make sure they're getting food because, and then they're going to school and they've got awful school lunches, or people are serving cupcakes and they're serving all of this stuff. And you lose that, you feel like you don't have control. It's not true. I think that's the first thing is you have to take your control back and stop having the sense that you don't have control. It's not really about control, but it's you do have to have that empowerment of like, this isn't about me being out of control. So I think that's where I've seen it get really dicey. After birth, it's not as easy. But when they get into preschool, that's when it gets really hard. And that's what I've seen, is that's when parents are like, I have no control anymore because they're going to their friends' houses and there's birthday parties and there's, and then my kid's the weird kid, and they have all these negative thoughts. And so back to your original question, yes, you have to care. And so my husband would say, you have to have brain envy. And so in this case, I would say you just have to like simplify it with your child. And it's like, I want to focus on health. You just have to like really be thinking, what is health and what is not health, right? And start there.
Yeah.
So
words of wisdom.
let's simplify it even more. So let's say in that age group, from birth until 2 years old, where the brain's growing so much, and the baby is still under your control, mostly, then what is the worst food you can give? And what is the best food you can give in those first 2 years?
So I'm going to everybody says this, and I'm going to keep pounding on it. Sugar, and it's in everything. Yeah. The sugar and the dyes. And I think those are two of the biggest culprits. But sugar is in everything. And parents don't really even know what to look for because there's so many names for sugar. And so that becomes an issue. And so when you're giving children that much sugar all the time, you're crowding out other nutrients, first of all. It sets them up for lots of brain issues along the way. And we've seen that's, a lot of behavioral issues, a lot of mood issues, rapid brain cell firing, the problems. You showed the stats for diabetes. I actually had those stats ready to go. But what happens is, you're getting these spikes in blood sugar and then these drops, and childhood obesity is through the roof. So sugar, and more sugar. You've got to get rid of the sugar, at least minimize it.
And best food?
Well, obviously the whole foods. So I think one of the things, and parents are like, well, my kids won't eat it. And I think one of the things I learned, and I love this, when I learned it, I stopped fighting with my daughter. And I thought this was so important. There's a reason kids don't like the taste of certain vegetables. And I didn't know this until I really got into doing my book, was that their taste buds aren't developed. It's like you think it's a battle of wills. It's really not. They actually don't, they haven't developed those taste buds. And so that tastes really awful to them, different than it does to you. And all of a sudden, when they're 16, 17, 20, they're fine with it, right? So when I learned that, I'm like, I'm not going to fight her on the ones she absolutely won't eat. I'm going to focus on the ones she will. We named broccoli trees. You know, we came up with little names for things so that she would like it. And then I found ways to hide it. I would like blend up vegetables, put it in, you know, chili, or I'd put it in her favorite foods. And I found ways to rehab her favorite recipes. So if she liked chicken fingers, I just made healthy chicken fingers. So finding a way to get those vegetables, because when you ask the question, which foods, whole foods, it's not going to change, right? It's going to be vegetables, it's going to be protein and healthy fat. Those are the things. And when kids get those sugary, simple carb breakfasts before school or before preschool, then you get the call, your kid is out of control. I think they have ADD. We got to start there. That's what we do at our clinics. We actually start with nutrition. That's one of the cornerstones. So getting the sugar out, getting the whole foods back in, not fighting with them. And the other thing we do is we make it a game. So in our house, it became a game. And so we tried to make it fun. It's not about fighting with them.
Absolutely agree to that. And on previous episodes, we've spoken to, you know, some other experts like Dr. Bill Sears. And one thing that we've all kind of agreed on, that we share this idea that creating a sense of empowerment with a child to audit the fridge for the rainbow. That is to say, let them decide if they're out of purple. If grapes happen to be, and to your point, their favorite purple fruit, well, then bring them shopping and have them empowered to pull purple grapes into the basket, or if it's out of red. But as soon as you empower them by letting them audit the fridge, they will start to remind you. It is that empowerment that you brought up a moment ago. I want to, for both of you, get into supplementing the diet, because as whole foods as you possibly can get. I feel like we're still in North America. Heard you talk about this often, that we are eating a sad diet. Doesn't matter how whole. We're still in that, standard American sad diet. But on the show we bring up something called a consensus, and this is a review of science, and it's all of the best evidence that's available. And then we ask it a question, partly powered by artificial intelligence. The question I just asked when I was hearing you guys talk was, is sugar bad for children and brain health? And of course it is. And what we're seeing here, though, is where a lot of the science is saying yes. Some of the science still indicates no. Why is this lagging? We know that it's behind obesity. We know it's behind oral health. We know it's behind the deficiencies, right? Because this is empty carbohydrate. Is it because the brain still does need some form of sugar? Is that what this is saying?
No, I don't think it's that at all.
But I would want to know which studies those are. And
right.
I need to read the studies.
No, but my point is along those lines too, Tana, is that, why has it taken America all this time to finally outlaw all the food diets?
Right.
Okay. Which were never allowed into the EU or European countries ever, because the science was there and we knew it was bad for children's brain.
Right.
It's taken a while for America to catch up and turn that ship around.
We do so many things, like dough conditioners. Why? Why do we have dough conditioners when they don't have dough conditioners? It's it doesn't make sense.
I think these will turn around as well.
Well, let me point something out, because this
does
show...
But I do think studies can be skewed too. So.
Well, and that's very true as well. And that's the problem when you start to isolate a single study, and that's all. But that's why we go to consensus. So if you take another peek here, if I could blow this up, the no is, these well-controlled meta-analyses looking at high-impact journals found no significant effect on sugar on children's behavior. But look at what this is. The recency is 1995. So we have started catching up.
Yeah.
We have started realizing that. And what happens in science is, see how many citations no papers got? Well, it takes a while before these recent papers start getting citations. So the waiting. So this is where we encourage our viewers and listeners all the time to do their due diligence, right? Do the research. But with a keen eye for, that level of skepticism, right?
Do you remember, I have to bring this up, because do you remember I don't remember the name, but the paper that came out about low fat, the study that was done at Harvard, and the low fat diets, it was fat that was the culprit, and they were actually paid by the sugar industry. Okay, come on.
Yeah. All this was started by Ansel Keys back in the early 70s.
So they were paid off by the sugar industry to say that it wasn't sugar.
Today's episode of The First 7 Years is proudly brought to you by AskDrSears.com, your trusted source for expert parenting advice, nutrition tips, and natural health solutions. With over 50 years of pediatric experience, the Sears family is dedicated to helping parents raise happy, healthy children. Visit AskDrSears.com to learn more and discover their wealth of resources designed for every stage of your child's development. Yep.
No, and then clinically, obviously, you must see it in your clinic day in, day out.
Oh, that's always
the
we
effect.
so much.
I mean, and for me, clinically is what the evidence.
And look, we're not saying that every kid is the same.
Right.
So that's the first thing we do. We typically will, if we have a kid that has significant behavioral issues or mood issues, which is mostly what we see, my husband will put them on an elimination diet usually. If they're really severe, they've got something very, very severely clinical, he's going to use medication. But typically that's not where we start. That's not the first thing we do. That's the last thing he wants to do is put kids on medication. So if they're suicidal or they're hearing voices, he might do something. But we start with things like nutrition, supplements. We don't want to label them and have that stick with them for the rest of their life. That's just not what you want. And it changes brain chemistry when you start some of that.
Sure.
Yeah. So here's another question that we just asked the science, because we often tackle this on the show as well. Can you eat yourself into therapeutic range of certain nutrients? That really is an important question to ask across all ages and stages. Zero to brain formation. Here you talk about it all the time. This is your life and mission work. It's constantly growing and or forming until 25? And then the most formative years are 0 to 7.
I think for girls it's 25 and boys is 27.
27 even, right. Okay, so the brain, and the nice thing, and your husband was kind enough to contribute to my more recent book, Brain Spanners, we now know that neuroplasticity continues on forever, our whole lives. That is to say, connecting and unconnecting. And even some degree of neurogenesis. We're all making new nerve cells, particularly in the memory centers. But the question was just asked here, and I want to hear from both of you. Do supplements, dietary supplements, vitamins, minerals, nutraceuticals, botanicals, etc., improve health outcomes in children? Once again, seems like the science is somewhat mixed. But, Tana, over to you. Tana, sorry, I knew it was going to happen. Tana, over to you. When it comes to eating yourself as much as you can get just, sort of whole foods, do you feel like you could, ultimately achieve the perfect diet and never need supplements? Or what's your
I don't know that it's impossible. I actually don't know that it's impossible. But I will say that in the lifestyle that most of us live, it's probably not going to be very easy. But the first thing I do tell people is you cannot supplement your way out of a bad diet.
Right.
You can't supplement your way out of a lack of sleep. You can't supplement your way out of a lack of exercise. So do I think that you can, get mostly there? If you live in a really clean environment, if you're doing all the right things, you can probably get close. That's why for us, I don't know that you can get all the way there, though, because our soil is depleted. There's a lot of other factors. We are stressed. We don't sleep enough. I mean, there's all these other things. There's environmental toxins we don't really have control over at this point, right? Individually. So for us in our clinics, we test people. It's like we don't really think that one supplement program fits everybody. We want to kind of know where you're at. Do you need all of these supplements, or do you just need specific ones for you? But almost everybody we test, even if they think they are fine and they're getting enough sun, they're low in vitamin D and they're low in omega-3 fatty acids because they eat too many omega-6 fatty acids.
Right.
They're imbalanced.
And I'm also reminded, the question, what's the best supplement for sleep? I mean, for the immune system, sleep.
Sleep.
There is no supplement.
See, we would tell you start with sleep. Everything starts with sleep. Because that's when the brain cleans itself. It's when your body resets itself. It's when you grow.
What percentage of children are you guys seeing at the end?
Oh, a lot. I don't know the exact percentage, but that's at least half of our business. if not
Really?
more. Oh, yeah. Because most of our doctors are child psychiatrists.
Right.
So they're double board certified. My husband is double board certified.
And when you say test, are we talking primarily the SPECT scan, or are we saying other?
So a lot of people think that we do everything just on a SPECT scan.
Right.
The SPECT scan is really just it's one of the tools. It's the map to help us get where we're going. But we do blood testing. You do a very long, thorough history. We're going to do a history with you. You do brain testing. We want to see how you are functioning cognitively, what your negativity bias is. Like all of these different things matter. We want to talk to your family. Then you have 2 appointments with the doctor. It's not that cut and dried as looking at a scan. What the scan does is it really helps us. It helps us know whether the brain is working too hard or not hard enough. Because when you it's very interesting. My husband published a huge study showing that when soldiers come home from war, that when they have, they're suicidal, they're having issues. Usually they're given one treatment plan. It's the same treatment plan. Half of them get better. Half of them feel suicidal. Why? Because when you look at their brains, PTSD and traumatic brain injury, it should be common sense. They look very different in the brain. PTSD means your brain is working way too hard. The emotional centers are fired up. It's like overactive. Whereas physical trauma, which is what I saw as a trauma nurse, right? That's where you've like really hurt the brain tissue, and now it's underactive. So does it make sense that you would give them, just because the symptoms are the same when they present, I'm suicidal, I'm anxious, I'm, so you give them the same treatment based on those symptoms, but the brain's not functioning the same way in those two things, even though the symptoms seem the same. Right. So that's why we look at the scan. Are they working too hard? Are they not working hard enough? And sometimes it's something like PANDAS, right? So it's based on an old strep infection, and the brain now is like on fire. And we've seen that a lot. Yeah. Or in some cases, some kids do have an allergy to gluten, which, that might not be, that's not that common, but it's something that we have to figure it out. Why is your brain working too hard? Is it Lyme disease? Are you, what else is going on in your life? Is it emotional trauma? Whatever it is, but it just shows us. Yeah. Or did you get in a car accident? Did you have a traumatic birth experience where you have anoxia at birth? Like, those things matter.
Yeah. So hyperactive or hypoactive?
Yes. But sometimes the symptoms present the same.
Yeah.
And I did want to point this out. So what we're looking at up on screen here is that, of course, you guys have, an icon for the brain spec, but there are, as we know, there are very comprehensive psychiatric evaluations. This is what we'll talk about a little bit more: supplement and medication management, memory rescue, concussion rescue, HBOT, whole integrated medicine, psychotherapy, which is huge. The list is very long.
We do QEEG a lot of times on if we can't do a scan on someone, or we don't need to do a scan on someone, and we just want to see what's going on. The scan isn't the only thing we do.
Right. Just wanted to point that out, because I think a lot of parents out there and wondering, is there something maybe even visibly or physically or mentally, emotionally wrong with my child? How can we look at the one thing I just know you to say all the time, which is just such a truth for me, both you and your husband, is it is the only profession, that is to say psychiatry, that is a specialty of an organ, that is to say the brain, that otherwise until recently didn't even look in at the brain, but made educated guesses around it. What are you guys seeing when it comes to diagnostics for children 0 to 7? What are the primary issues you're battling or trying to help parents with?
Well, because of the nature of our business, it's all over the place. Yeah. So, we see everything from ADD to, autism. We're seeing all kinds of things. So sometimes they're coming in and their brains are just on fire. We see a lot of kids with PANDAS. We see, I wouldn't say that's as common, but we're seeing a lot of stuff like that. We see a lot of traumatic birth, issues where kids are acting out and the parents don't know why. But I would say ADD is probably, ADHD is probably our hallmark. That we see.
And this is now in the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, number 5. Is it still number 5? Or is it
I think
6
it's 5.
Yeah. That it's a spectrum, that we're all somewhere on it, right?
Yeah.
What are the go-tos? Let's talk about that as it pertains to supplementation. What are just doesn't matter where you're on the spectrum, what are the go-tos if you suspect it and or have a proper diagnosis when it comes to nutrient supplementation?
I think very basic, footsteps to start with. Number 1 rule: remove anything that could be irritating the brain. ADD, ADHD is both something, it comes from irritation, inflammation. So let's look and remove anything, which can be dyes, foods, metals, chemicals, plastics, any of those things. So let's look, test if we can, and then remove. Many times that's enough, just removing the obstacle.
Offending agent, right.
And then if it's not, then you start with the supplementation. Again, testing, seeing what's high, what's low, what's medium. And if there is anything in there like the heavy metals or plastics, then what can we give to help chelate and detoxify those out? Most of the time, many, many times, this is the solution.
You sound like one of our doctors, I guess. That's exactly what we do.
Yeah.
And we start with nutrition. We start with the basics. We start with testing. That's exactly what we do. In our case, we also look to see, were you ever in a car accident? Did you have a head injury? Did you have a traumatic birth? There are other things that can cause it to be sleepy, but when it comes, we'd still do the same thing. Yeah.
Great.
We would want to find the things that stimulate that area of the brain.
One little piece that you did online caught my eye, and I know it wasn't featured as an ADHD smoothie, but it may as well have been. And it's very applicable to children, you know, of 4, 5, and 6. And let me see if I can speak English. You have done it with your own daughter as she was growing older. And it was a milk alternative, I believe, with some high protein and some essential fat. Just tell us about that recipe, because I know this would translate for a lot of listeners and viewers out there that are wondering, how can I amplify, starting with diet, my child's brain health?
So smoothies are a go-to fast food for me. So many people in our society, they're so busy. And with kids, you have to think about what they like. Well, and one thing kids love are things like acai bowls and crazy stuff that's not good for them, but you can rehab those. But starting with a smoothie, and you can turn a smoothie into an acai bowl. That's why I said that. But anyways, that's one of the things we've always done in our house, because I can actually sort of tailor it to what she likes, figure out what berries she likes, let her help with it. She doesn't see me putting in the greens. She doesn't see me putting in the vitamins. You can hide so many things in there.
Right.
Like in mine in the morning, I put mushroom powder in it. I put collagen in it. I put all kinds of things in it. Whereas with a kid, you can hide some of those nutrients that they're not going to let you sneak in otherwise. And so that's really good. But I want you to go back to the basics always. It's like, what is the healthiest protein and fat and complex carbohydrates I can start their day with? Like, those are the fiber. Like, what can I start their day with? And if you just stick to that. So for me, it's going to be nut butter if they're not allergic to nuts, or coconut butter, or avocado, things like that. You're going to start with the healthy protein. We use a plant-based protein for the smoothies. And then a milk alternative. For us, it's almond milk. For some people, it wouldn't be almond milk. It'd be something else. And then start with that. And it's a great way to get hydration, because when you're dehydrated, they've done studies, you're 19% more powerful in the gym when you are properly hydrated. And a study on pilots that was done that found that if they were only 2% dehydrated, they made more cognitive errors. Well, I don't want to be on that plane. I don't know about you. So likewise, you don't want your kid going to school being improperly hydrated and improperly nourished, and where they're having a bunch of sugar, which is spiking their blood sugar, tanking their blood sugar, causing behavioral issues. The blood sugar alone, forget the ADHD and all the studies that are arguing over that. Spiking blood sugar and dropping it is going to affect you cognitively, if nothing else.
And how about some omega-3s?
Absolutely. And probiotics. So those are the things that for when my daughter was young, now she'll take her probiotics, but I would just put it in her smoothie. So omega-3 fatty acids for sure. So I pretty much put most of her supplements into her smoothie when she was young, because it's just the easiest. We actually make a powder that is vitamin powder. And then there are just some great, we actually make a fish oil that's, there's all kinds of foil packs now you can do. And those will go in there and they don't taste them. So it's a fantastic way to do it, because those EPA and the DHA is so important when they're young for brain development.
Critical.
We're fatheads.
Yeah,
right. Let's
absolutely.
admit it.
I was Sam a fat girl. I love fat. Like, that's my go-to.
And DHA, the docosahexaenoic acid, EPA is important. We hear about these buzz terms all the time. Is the brain juice, right? That's the stuff.
Just going back to basics, 60% of the brain is made from fats and oils, and 50% of the 60% is DHA.
Right.
That one single fatty acid, which is most commonly found in fish and algae, because they eat the algae that has the DHA.
Right.
So, DHA throughout childhood for me, critical. There was a Journal of Pediatrics 2001 study done in Norway, obviously, where they have a lot of fish oil. They had two groups of mothers. One group of pregnant mothers, they gave corn oil during pregnancy. The other group, they gave cod liver oil, and then followed their children through to the age of 5. And on average, the group that just had the cod liver oil during pregnancy, children were 4 to 5 IQ points higher. Just that one
Isn't that amazing?
single thing, right? Just give the body and the brain what it needs to function properly, and it'll grow properly and function properly.
It's amazing.
This is where I'm going to lobby back to my original, postulation. See if it sticks this time, though. That is to say, and I'm with you guys 100% of the way. Start with food, make it organic, whole foods. But when it comes to these oils, is a perfect argument, I think, in my favor. Can we actually eat ourselves into this therapeutic range when it comes to omega-3s? And even if we tried, are we not also kind of bringing in some of these toxins that come along with things like the fatty fish? That's the argument I have anyways. I believe in a perfect world, maybe, right? A piece
Right,
of
this is
fish
not a
every day,
perfect
but
world.
it's we don't live in one. That's the idea. So let's agree to agree. How much should at each stage, 0 to 2, 4, 5, 6, 0 to 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6 and 7. Those three different sort of ages and stages. What's the requirement of DHA in these brains?
So let's even start the stage before pregnancy.
In utero, absolutely.
I mean, that is shown not just for the baby, but for the mother's mental health after pregnancy. Shown higher DHA levels prevents postpartum depression. So a minimum for pregnancy, 500 milligrams a day of DHA. You can have EPA on top of that, but 500 milligrams DHA. Then if the mother's breastfeeding and taking that still, then the baby is going to get that in the first 6 months at least. And then when solid foods start, that's when you can start smuggling it in, as you spoke so well about. And you can also start giving those other omega-3s, like the avocado, those foods that don't necessarily have the DHA, but are giving the other spectrum of the omega-3. And then for me, it's sort of 500 milligrams throughout childhood is minimum for a healthy child. If there's issues, ADD, ADHD on the spectrum, then you need to go up higher to therapeutic levels to actually have an impact. Yeah. But 500 milligrams is my minimum.
So can I ask you one question?
Yeah.
So instead of can you, it's in my mind, it's like, but even if you could, will you?
Right.
And that's, I think, one of the big questions, because when we test people, they're mostly out of range, like way out of range.
Low. And I was going to ask you that. At the
So-
Amen clinics, you guys are testing omega-3 levels.
Yes.
Is that the work of Dr. Bill Harris? Is that the omega
Yes.
quant? Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
We're big fans of his. We had his daughter on the show, and she's basically running the show over there right now as it relates to testing. They've got amazing DHA on breast milk tests now that new moms can actually test their breast milk
That's
for
amazing.
DHA. Important for them as well, like you said. It's like their saturation points,
Absolutely.
right? Cardiovascular health, immune health, brain health, all of it.
One of the things that surprised me is how many people, because I'm trying to help come up with these plans sometimes, and I was teaching classes, and I can't tell you, because women are, or families, I should say, are so busy, they're so tired, they're working. You got moms working outside the home now and trying to, be super mom and show up at everything, and it's really hard. And I can't tell you how often we've heard, look, can you just give my kid medicine? Yeah. I was like, what? I was so surprised. They're just tired. So to answer your question, it's like, could you? I don't know. But will you? I don't, we don't find that that's the case. I do think it's trending more that way. People are more concerned now. We just don't live in a perfect world where everybody has that kind of time. That's why my whole career was built on trying to simplify. How do I come up with simple recipes?
Right.
5 ingredients or less that I can have moms do really easily. Because if you don't make it simple, they're not going to do it. They can't, especially if they got 4 kids and they've got ADD themselves.
It was very true, because there's that genetic component there, of course, as well. What's interesting, I mean, if we were to come full circle, I would suggest, you really have to care that deeply about your own health and your brain and your child's brain and other things. And then you, I think, may have to, this is perhaps a little bit more nomenclature or reframing semantics, but what is DHA? I would argue it's actually a medicine. So if they want a medicine, that just happens to be a more natural medicine. It does
That's
work
how we see it.
medicinally.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we don't call it that, but that's how we see it. We always start with that. We always start with the basics,
What about B? I know that, for a long time, B complex, the B vitamins, they just become so sort of, it loses the allure and the charm once it's sort of, I've seen it already before. So it's on health food store shelves for decades now. But the level of importance of a really good B vitamin and choline, should we reintroduce this to folks? Because, it controls so many things.
Yeah. No, if we go back even further back, the Canadian psychiatrist Dr. Carl Pfeiffer coined the term orthomolecular psychiatry, which is what you're applying so beautifully today. So when he said orthomolecular, he's talking treat the body with what the body's made of, and you're using that as medicine. It's just you need those therapeutic levels most times to have the impact and the effect. but B6 was one of his go-to.
Yeah.
Well, and I don't know about maybe you can answer this with childhood, but I know I have the mutation for the 5-MTHFR.
Yep.
So my daughter has it, my mother had it.
Yep.
So I would argue that like knowing those things is really important.
Absolutely. No, if you're not, then anything that you're exposed to is going to keep building up.
Exactly. You're not
building up,
detoxifying.
building up, and eventually have an impact.
Right.
Well, now you're talking my language. If I come from a space of genomic evaluation, that's really what I do in clinical
I love
practice.
this.
But
That
I just have
fascinates
to,
me.
now that you've opened Pandora's box in me, just real quick,
Yeah.
methylation is, of course, a whole pathway, as you well know. MTHFR is but one of those, we like to refer, and we've talked about this on the show actually, of the methylation pathway is a relay race, where the methylator, or the CH3, to be real simple about it, is the baton. And in this race of 5 racers, the most important, passing the baton and winning the time is ultimately what's going to win the race. And most of us drop the baton at some point in that relay race. But it's more than just MTHFR. There's SHMT1, there's MTR, there's MTRR, there's fecal transferase. FAT2, that's related to the gut, by the way. But so B12, this is what I'm getting at, and folic acid has to be in the right format for your child. And by knowing their genes is how you're going to know what format to give it to them. Right? And this is brain changing. So whether we give them folate or folic acid or folinic acid are all different.
Right.
Or adenylcobalamin or cyanocobalamin. So point is, it's this simple. Test. Test
See,
to address.
that's the problem. So people always write to me, and especially on social media, tell me what you do for your supplement routine. I'm not going to tell you what I do for my supplement routine because you
It's
can't
for
copy
me.
me.
Right.
So you have to get tested. And so it would be irresponsible for me to do that. Like I will tell them what I'm doing, with the caveat, this is why I'm doing it and why you should not do it.
Right.
But you should get tested to see if you have the same thing I have. So you have to be working with someone experienced who does that, you're like getting me excited because that's like what I'm fascinated by. If I had known that sooner, I wonder, would I have been so sick? I have no idea, but would I have? My daughter followed my footsteps. So that's important to know.
What you guys are doing at the Amen clinics, knowledge is empowerment at its most extreme and applicable way. And so knowing by looking and by testing is to be able to assess and address. So we talked a little bit about these like nutrients, right? But how about the anti-nutrients? How about these toxins? What are you guys finding is affecting children 0 to 7 most? What, if any, negative, toxic or environmental pollutants? Is that something that you guys are looking at and that you can advise parents that these are the most common things found and here's how you manage them?
So we try to educate them like in a general way to start, like things like I love the Think Dirty app or the environmental working group app. Like your products in your house actually make a difference. For women who love candles, we all love these candles. Try using aromatherapy instead, or fresh flowers, or something that's less toxic. Start with the simple stuff. Get rid of your plastic bottles. Start carrying a Stanley or whatever it is. Start with those simple things that you can do. But when it comes to like if your child's having or you are having mood issues or behavioral issues, we want to look. I can't tell you how many people we have tested and mercury was an issue, or lead was an issue. And so knowing what products, like even with formula, baby formula, knowing that like the sugar, I'm going to keep harping on that, sugar, dyes, but also knowing that it's third-party tested or your supplements are third-party tested, so you're not getting these cheap products that have heavy metals in them. And when you talked about eating a perfect diet, that's one of the issues is I know like some people are more susceptible than others. My mercury doesn't go up as high as my husband's. My husband goes really high. So fish oil for him is way more important than eating fish every day. That's just not going to happen. So I think knowing those things is really important because those are the things that we see a lot.
Yeah, no, in my, from my experience, the heavy metals really are sort of at the top of problem.
Yeah, with heavy metals and infections. We're just seeing so much with infections. And
Brain
the brain being on fire because of kids having certain infections.
Well, this really interests me because, most of us walk around with titer antibody or testable measures of having had illness, whether it's Epstein-Barr virus that causes mono, or it's cytomegalovirus, or it's herpes simplex family, or Lyme disease, or you name it on the menu and list of things we're exposed to as children. But not all of us walk around with symptoms, right? Those of us who don't necessarily deal well with that infection, which, by the way, evolutionarily, from a genetic perspective, may actually have been beneficial, but no longer is. But that's a whole other story. now what we can do is actually test for these genes. They're called glutathionization, that allow the body to detoxify exceptionally well, somewhere in the middle or not at all. The children that have these challenges, by and large, in my clinical experience anyways, are children that are devoid, have what are called null variants of glutathionization. So GSTT1 nulls. These individuals just need glutathionization support. So, helping them with how their bodies make glutathione, which is, by the way, if they find out this is a problem, simple things like N-acetylcysteine or selenium.
So easily done.
Brazil nuts is hundreds of micrograms of selenium in 3 Brazil nuts. What else? Alpha lipoic acid. All these are just natural ingredients to get the body to work better on its own. Cordyceps, another brilliant.
Yes, we love mushrooms.
I was going to say, what mushrooms are your favorite? Because you mentioned you put that in your smoothie. I wanted to dissect that.
Yeah, I'd say cordyceps is probably one of my favorites because the energy. I feel good when I take it. But
absolutely.
we do have a blend of mushrooms in our powder, and I love mushroom powder.
I'm a lion's mane guy.
I like lion's mane too. That's in ours too. Yeah, I like it a lot.
Today's episode of The First 7 Years is proudly brought to you by Omega Quant, your go-to source for understanding omega-3 and DHA levels in both you and your child. And did you know that DHA levels in breast milk are crucial for your baby's brain development and vision? With Omega Quant's simple at-home breast milk DHA test, you can ensure your baby is getting the nutrition they need for their best start in life. Visit omegaquant.com to learn more and take care of your child's early health.
So I would love to get your input and your thoughts on over supplementing, because I see this a lot. So a lot of people think that because they think supplements are innocuous, I've seen this a lot with especially moms, that especially when they get pregnant, they're like, well, I'm going to take my prenatal. And this just happened recently with me, with one of my friends. And then she sends me, I had no idea when she bought her prenatal, she was still thinking about taking all of her other stuff too. And I'm like, I think you need to think about that because, and I gave her a list of questions to ask her doctor because I'm like, I'm not going to tell you not to, but you need to ask. I think you're overdoing it on some of these. So, you know.
It definitely. I mean, if we just go back to the basic concept, everything in the body is in the body in the right amount.
Right.
Not in the same amount for everybody because we all have our own fingerprint. Everybody's is different. So it's going to be a different amount in every child and every person. But if we understand, where the starting point of the RDIs are and where the therapeutic high limits are, then we can tailor it, for each child, each person. But without looking at it that way, then sure, you can
like
take
fat soluble vitamins or zinc. You don't want to overdo that either.
Yeah.
Well, even some of the B vitamins, what we call water solubles, right? Water solubles, B6, you mentioned a minute ago. B6 is, you don't want to get too high with B6. Folic acid. So everything is, I think what you're referring to is Goldilocks for the person, right? But upper range. So I just want, nutrient recommendations and the databases that establish RDI lower level versus UL upper limits is probably for most people you want to be somewhere in between or the Goldilocks phenomenon. But there's all kinds of these dietary reference intake reports. This is on the NIH, and people can come here and they can look, let's say, for calcium and D. But what we know is that most people are getting the recommendation. Tana, I heard you talk about this. Vitamin D, for example, they're getting, take 500 IU or 1,000 IU. I don't care if you live in LA or you're where I'm from in Toronto, living north of 40 for sure there. You're not getting enough sun and you're not converting enough vitamin D. You need in the thousands, most people. But RDI will suggest, extreme lower limits.
And that's where we see problems.
Right.
Yeah. So we want you tested.
Yeah.
That's
because,
it, bottom line.
for me, having a thyroid issue and gut issues means I don't absorb it the same way. So I have to take higher doses. Someone else takes lower doses.
Yeah.
Right. I just didn't want to miss this as well. You recommended, I think you referenced the Environmental Working Group as a place to go. You also talked about
Think Dirty.
Think Dirty. It's this one here. Think Dirty. Is that the app here? Yeah. So you can basically plug and play. Is this ingredient or is this product?
I had no idea my sunscreen was going to kill me. It's like sunscreens are the worst. Right. So that's how I figured out. These things I didn't know were as toxic as they are. Even ones that say, they're healthy. Yeah. You have to be really careful. Yeah.
What do we need to avoid in the sunscreen? Because not all sunscreens, right?
No.
It's how often you're using it and what types of.
And what types?
You want to avoid the oxybenzones and the parabenzenes and any of the ozones and whatever, but the physical blockers are okay, right?
The petroleum-based is the worst.
Right.
So anything related to the petrolatum, petroleum,
and then the zinc oxide and titanium dioxide. But again, blocking the sun is probably something the average person shouldn't be doing. Average
Problematic in itself.
Right, exactly. So it's a balance. It's really understanding.
Any tips on other techniques to minimize toxin exposure in the household for new parents of children? Of the young age, 0 to 7?
I think it starts with actually educating yourself on what is toxic. I think a lot of people don't really even understand that what most women that I know don't know that candles are toxic. They don't understand that air fresheners are toxic. So I think actually just understanding, even things like cleaning your fruits and vegetables, sometimes rinsing them under the water may not be enough. Knowing which, I think the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15 is really important for people to know.
Yep.
Because not everybody, some people are on a really tight budget. So knowing which products are critical that you get organic, the ones that hold the most pesticides versus the ones that aren't really as important, that's really important to know. I think those are places where people can start, is just knowing what is toxic.
Absolutely. Makes perfect sense. Can we do another consensus? Can we see whether or not probiotics and gut health affects mood and behavior?
If this one
in
comes
children?
up, no, I'm like lose my mind.
So what should we ask? Let's ask, does the microbiome, what should we ask, affect mood and behavior in children? What's your consensus, guys?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Why?
What is the gut-brain axis?
What is it?
Ask that question.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, put it simply, our gut is our second brain. That's as simple and clear as you can put it. What happens here, and vice versa. It's not a one-way street, it's a two-way street. So whatever is happening in the gut is affecting mood, neurotransmitter levels, the whole works. And whatever is happening up here in terms of our thoughts and our demeanor and our mind is also being relayed back to here. So two-way street, we have to treat both of them with the greatest respect. Same way we can have a leaky gut, we can have a leaky brain barrier.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which is, I think, when you mentioned so many kids with these infections now,
Bingo.
because that brain barrier has become permeable and that the immune system in the brain is not doing its job that it's built to do. So brain and gut are inseparable.
I totally agree. And that's why we have so many functional medicine doctors that work at our clinics. It's why we do so much gut testing. It's why we start with nutrition. It's what we see all the time is if we can get their gut healthy and get their nutrition right, it's the cornerstone of our treatment, especially for kids.
Yeah.
I'm going to triple down and say in clinical practice, no matter what the age is, young through old, if you do the gut rehab almost blindly, frankly, without testing for leaky gut, which I typically do because I want to know there's a baseline and improvement, but blindly doing gut rehabilitation is going to improve the majority of children when there is eczema, mood behavior disorder, sleep issues, name it.
Any and everything.
Yeah. So here's the consensus. And I think this is a good reflection of where science is right now. So yes is firm 40%. It's mixed for about the 50%, possibly 50% and mixed. But here's the good news. No one's saying no. So there's growing evidence that the gut microbiome can influence mood behavior in children, affects the immune system, and disturbances in the microbiota, the good friendly bacteria, commensal bacteria, especially early in life, are linked to changes in brain development, social behavior, and risk of neurodevelopmental disorders. So the science is quite clear. And what are we to do? Again, back to the kind of, can we eat and even introduce enough sauerkraut, kimchi, and fermented foods in our child's diet, or do we have to resort to probiotics and pills? What are your thoughts?
It depends on the kid. Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Do they have autism?
Reading each other's minds here. There you go.
Do they have autism? Are they do they have a weird thing about textures?
Yeah.
Are they? It really depends. Like my daughter liked yogurt, and I wouldn't give her yogurt with sugar in it. So I'd put a little monk fruit in it, or something like that, and then we would, I'd put some berries in there, and I would do some homemade granola. Not all kids will do that. Yeah. So, and then some kids are way too sensitive to dairy. It just depends.
Yeah.
On the kid.
Yep. Totally.
Is there a strain or species, though, Doc, that you would say, ages 0 to 2, and maybe even another different ones, 4, 5, 6? Are there certain ones that we can't easily find that we should supplement with?
I mean, I don't think not easily found, but the most present, the most fundamental ones. So in infancy, and especially that first year, bifidobacterium is number one. And then as you go up from there, then you bring in the lactobacillus species, plantarum, those ones.
Right.
These are just the fundamental ones, that help everything else there. But we have to remember, this is so important, that there's prebiotics, there's probiotics, and postbiotics. And we can put all the prebiotics in all day long. If we don't give the fiber and the prebiotic,
There's
they're really
no
not
food.
going to, they won't live.
Bingo.
Yeah, they won't colonize. So just remember, prebiotic, probiotic, postbiotic.
Right. And for parents out there trying to explain this phenomenon to their young children, because again, engaging them in the understanding, it's important. I love the way you described this to your daughter, that Lucy and Biffy wrote down.
It was Lacey.
Lacey.
Biff and Lacey.
Yeah, there you go. Tell us.
So we made it a game. I actually got little stuffed animals, and we called it. We made it a game. We called them Biff and Lacey, and because she would like, why do I have to eat this? I'm like, because these are literally like the little. We had a big dog, and so it's like the watchdogs, and they're in your tummy, and they're like watching out for everything, and they're like making sure that the bad guys don't come in and wreck everything, So, and I was like, they're going to protect you, and you have to protect them, and so that's how we sort of explained it to her, and got her on board.
I think it's great. I think kids have to know there are good bugs and bad bugs.
Yeah.
And, the good bugs in the gut help to defend against the bad bugs, and this whole relationship between gut immune system.
Because when I told her she
brain.
had bugs in her gut, she lost her mind.
Right.
And that was
I think
why,
most kids would.
Yeah.
What do you mean? I thought, don't we have to kill them? But unfortunately, that's part of the problem, isn't it? Is the antibiotic for whatever it might be, upper respiratory condition, ear, nose, throat, sinus, what have you, and then it ends up killing all the good
well,
stuff.
and help me out, because you guys can answer this way better, but I was actually taught and learned, and I don't know the stats on this, but kids who are on chronic antibiotics, their gut doesn't, like, they have trouble, like, chronically into later life if they're not careful and they don't do the right probiotic routine and repopulate that gut. Like, I think that's part of why I was chronically sick.
No, I've seen it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And not, that's the relationship. It's not just the gut problem with, chronic ongoing antibiotic use. It's also the effect on the brain. Mm-hmm. And so you get both impacted, by this ongoing use.
Yeah, it's so important.
Well, what's the good news, though? I mean, can you reestablish diversity in the gut even after years of
the beauty with
antibiotic?
childhood is that everything's fixable, everything's flexible, everything's changeable. So just give the right influences, give the right nutrients, give the right food, give the right diet, and your child's body and mind will change with it.
Absolutely. So we have this clinical term called dysbiosis, and unfortunately, even a single administration
That's what I heard.
of especially the broad spectrum causes an imbalance in bacteria. So the question becomes: do antibiotics cause dysbiosis in children? In the scientific literature, there isn't even room for possibility or mixed. It's absolutely 100%.
When I read this, I was like, well, no wonder.
Right.
Yeah.
So we were just talking about these guys. Biff is lowered and Lucy is absent, and the richness of the diversity is gone. After a single, and that's not to say antibiotics are not useful at all, for sure. But what it is to say is post-antibiotic therapy, it's very necessary to probably skip the kimchi and go straight to the probiotic reinoculation of a diversity of strains and species.
Apparently in the Merck manual, like the Bible of allopathic medicine, many, many years ago, it actually said after antibiotics, pediatricians should give probiotics.
Oh, for sure.
I don't think I ever heard my daughter's pediatrician say that. And they thought I was a little nuts because I was like very, cautious with her nutrition. And I was the weird mom. That's okay.
The smart one.
Well, this conversation could go on and on and on. I can't believe when I'm looking at the time here, I realize we're already over an hour. That's always a good sign. That means we're all having lots of fun. But any sort of, I suppose, last words of advice, especially again for parents like we've talked about so much. 0 to 7 is our focus on the show. But in the brain warriors are ultimately what you guys are, standing first and foremost for this organ we don't revere as really the most important that controls every other organ in the body. Any words of advice sort of leave us off with is if there's a few things parents listen, attentively to here, that they should incorporate for their young ones when it comes to brain health?
I think if I were going to give advice, it's kids do what you do, not what you say. So you have to be really strong. It doesn't matter what you tell them. If you're not living the message, they're not going to do it. You have to be a good example. I think don't make it miserable and harp on them. Make it fun. Make it a game. We'd go to the grocery store and do treasure hunts, like we were talking about. If you can find 10 healthy alternatives, I'll give you X amount of money. Yeah, I use bribery, but that's okay. So make it fun. Get them in the kitchen. Get them cooking. They're way more invested. They're way more likely to want to eat what they cook. And don't expect perfection. I think perfection is the enemy of progress. And just do the best you can, give yourself grace, but just constantly be trying to make it better and make it fun. And I think when I see parents become very militant about it is when it becomes very difficult. Like I in my house, I only had healthy food. When my daughter went out and she was with friends or she was at a party, I didn't give her a hard time. I knew she was going to eat cupcakes. She'd run up and like shake it in my face, and she'd be, and it's like, I need to give her that space to figure out that it made her feel bad. And guess what? She figured it out. So, but I didn't, it's like the rules are at home. This is what happens. I don't supply it for you outside the house. I'm not going to give you that hard of a time if you do it. But she got to then figure out how that works.
Right.
Osmosis.
Yeah.
If I see which I have seen, as much as we've educated our kids, my now 18-year-old daughter, bring the car home and there's a McDonald's bag in the back, I die inside silently. Although I can't, but I don't confront her anymore because she is who she is. But I'm not entirely sure it's her or her friends either.
She'll come back.
Right, she'll come back.
I promise you. I've been through this.
I know, I appreciate that. Do we have any time? We have a lot of your questions on the show. Do we have time for a couple? Can we pick your brain from someone that you want to lead us off here, Dr. Murray?
Sure. This is from YouTube, Healthy Habits for Kids. What are your go-to brain-boosting snacks for kids?
Snacks. So there's a lot of them. I'm not a big fan of commercial snacks, but there are some simple ones you can do. So that's one of the reasons in my cookbook I did such simple, there's a whole section on snacks. So for example, I have a 2-ingredient nutty butter cup. Literally, it's 2 ingredients. It takes you 15 minutes to make it. Or coconut wraps. I love coconut wraps, and you can put nut butter in there with a little bit of banana, or you can do turkey that you can use them for savory or sweet. You can do turkey and avocado. Those are great. Anytime you're using fruit or vegetables and like guacamole or nut butter, I think those are simple. Some kids can have nuts. Not all kids can have nuts, so I think you have to watch that one. But trying to think of those healthier alternatives. I'm Middle Eastern. Half of my family is Middle Eastern. And the culture is so different. So, in America, kids come home, they run to the snack cabinet, they grab Cheetos. But in Middle Eastern culture, they don't think about that because when they get home from school, there's almost always vegetables, fruit, hummus, guacamole sitting out. So they're going to go for the first thing they see. And that's why so many Middle Eastern kids who come here for college are sort of like weirded out by how we eat. It's very interesting.
So I have to give this anecdote because it plays on that whole notion. I think as soon as you make, and I tried to do this for my children, you make healthy food tasty-ish, but convenient. Packaged up in glass Tupperware in the fridge, ready to go. Like one of my daughter's favorites was turkey cream cheese with slices of celery inside with the crunch. I would always give her those ingredients in the fridge, but would she go and make it herself? 9 times out of 10, not. But if I did them, put them in the fridge, she'd eat, it would be gone. Anyways, convenient. But the anecdote is this. I grew up mostly, with Italians, and the snack going into any of their homes was a knife. And you're like, what? The knife was meant to take you down to the cantina or and cut your own cheese and prosciutto with a piece of fresh bread, whatever. Anyways, that's Whole Foods. So we've got one from Mindful Mama. We've answered that earlier in the show. Mom on a Mission asks, I've heard conflicting things about dairy. Is it good or bad for brain development? What's the story?
I'm going to actually let you answer this ultimately, but I think, again, it's probably somewhat individual. But I do know that there are studies that show that kids who can't tolerate lactose from cow's milk can often, up to 85% of them, could tolerate sheep's milk or goat's milk. Also, yogurt and cheese are a little bit different. But I'm ultimately going to let you answer that one. I feel like you're the expert.
You just answered it.
Okay.
In my experience, more cow dairy milk is likely to be more of a problem for most kids than anything else. So my recommendation is don't why even bother? You know, you can get everything that's in the cow's milk from goat or sheep. I think sheep is even more digestible than the goat and certainly tastes better. So, you know, sheep milk, sheep yogurt, fantastic.
Manchego cheese is probably one of my favorites for salads and things like that.
I'm going to throw my hat in the ring and say pecorino. It's also high in omega-3s for the brain, too, just a hard cheese. But
I'll try
I know
it.
kids don't necessarily love that stuff. And then last, we've got from a Facebook follower, how much sugar is too much for a school-age child? So we talked a bit about that. And is juice really that bad?
Oh, don't get me started on juice. It's basically like a big giant bolus of just sugar. Yes, so in our house, juice was an absolute no, is a hard no, because it's basically constantly stimulating those pleasure centers in the brain. It's spiking blood sugar all day long. Our diabetes in our society for childhood has just gone, it's skyrocketed. I think it's up 400% or something crazy.
Well, it's almost up to 30%.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm taking it back to the 70s. From the 70s to now. Yeah. So it's just crazy how much it's gone up. It's bananas. So it causes rapid brain cell firing. I could go on and on. But when you're talking about juice, you're talking about the unwrapped form of fruit, and most of it's not even real fruit. Now they're just using high fructose corn syrup and water, and artificial color, dyes. So even if it was natural fruit, they're like, what if it's fresh squeezed orange juice? You're unwrapping it from its fiber source. So it's not taking any proper amount of time to digest, and you're not giving them one orange, you're giving them 8.
Right.
The juice of 8 oranges. So just give them an orange.
With the fiber.
And give them some water with a couple pieces of fruit in it that makes it look pretty. Or now there's so many waters that are like 0-calorie flavored waters, as long as it's not artificial flavoring. Yeah. Why? Why do we need to do juice?
You're right. And it's in the book, The Brain Warrior's Way Cookbook, over 100 recipes to ignite your energy and focus.
It's 50-second printing. I'm like,
attack illness and aging and transform pain into purpose. And you guys both wrote that, and it's still incredibly relevant, not even 10 years later. And people should pick that up if you want answers and tips to exactly what Tana has been talking about this entire show. Dr. Murray, as we exit, appreciating we've now kept Tana hostage for the last hour and
so
15
much
minutes.
Fun.
The tip of the day. You want to walk us through that? I feel like it's so relevant to the topic of discussion around supplements. Because at the end of the day, we want folks to realize, yes, they can start with a foundation of good food and make it as much from diet.
Sure.
But what's our tip when it comes to supplementing with a multi?
So understanding that we don't live in a perfect world anymore, it's very hard, even if you eat organic foods, to get everything, especially for a developing child's body and brain. And my other point is also, we need to think about supplementation to help neutralize and detoxify what our children have been exposed to in the environment, which didn't exist 100 years ago. So for that reason, a good multivitamin mineral is my sort of starting point. And with that, something for the brain, the DHA. So those are my 2 go-tos that I would recommend for most children, most families. When you look for it, again, no sugar, no artificial colorings, no artificial flavorings. And you want to just make sure it's being third-party tested, like Tana said before, free of any heavy metals, free of any pesticides. And then you're giving your child that sort of insurance policy that they will have everything they need to handle what they're being exposed to.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, it's been a blast and a pleasure to have you on the show. We hope you come back for folks to find out more about all the incredible work you and Dr. Amen are doing. It's the amenclinics.com for you, as we had up earlier, and I'm going to pull it up now, but it's just tanaamen.com. Wealth of information there as well, education, from blogs to travel and managing trauma and relationships, stuff around nutrition, health, and meditation, as well as motivation. So thank you for all that you do.
I feel like I could talk to you guys forever. You're like, we're like kindred spirits.
We're homies now after that.
No, truly, it's been a privilege and a real pleasure.
Thank you.
Knowing the history of your husband and yourself.
Thank you.
Referred many patients to your clinic over the years as well.
Wonderful.
So truly, it's a pleasure, a privilege, and Yeah, I could talk all day to you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
as can I. Thanks,
Yeah,
Tana.
yeah.
So for more expert tips on optimizing your child's brain health through clean nutrition and trusted advice, you can visit brainmd.com, tanaamen.com, the Amen Clinics.com. All of them are trusted resources for pure, effective supplementation and lifestyle backed by science. And don't forget to subscribe to The First 7 Years and share this episode with other parents looking for natural, evidence-based solutions. Until next time, stay well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.